Imagine a world of palaces shining like suns, of cities older than memory, of kings who believed the gods carved their names into eternity. A world where ships cross the Mediterranean like highways, carrying copper, tin, gold, spices, horses, ivory, and ideas. A world so interconnected, so confident, so impossibly advanced, that no one living in it could imagine it might fall. This was the Late Bronze Age, humanity's first truly global civilization. Picture the Eastern Mediterranean around 1300 BC. Dawn breaks over the Nile as priests chant in temples towering like mountains of stone. Officials wade through halls filled with carved hieroglyphs, counting shipments of grain that feed an empire. Inside the palace of Pharaoh Ramesses, scribes receive letters from foreign kings, tablets of baked clay stamped with cuneiform. Brother, the kings write to each other, send gold, send horses, send grain. Across the sea, the Hittite Empire rises among the rocky hills of Anatolia. Their capital, Hattusa, holds gates crowned with stone lions whose eyes glare at anyone who dares approach. In torchlit rooms, envoys speak in hushed voices about alliances, betrayals, dowries, and wars. A single marriage between royal families can mean decades of peace, or its sudden end. Travel west to Mycenae, where palaces loom above the Greek countryside like fortresses of another world. Massive cyclopean walls encase halls lined with bronze armor, gold masks, and painted shields. Warriors train with spear and sword while chariots thunder across fields, wheels slicing through dust. Further east, in the bustling port of Ugarit, a merchant wakes before sunrise. He walks toward the harbor, expecting to see ships arriving from Cyprus, Crete, and Egypt. But today, the horizon is empty. He frowns. For the first time in years, no sails approach, not a single one. He turns this over in his mind as he counts the crates in his warehouse. Tin is running low. Orders are piling up. Without new shipments, there will be no bronze. Not for tools, not for weapons, not for trade. He tells himself the ships will come tomorrow, but he doesn't know that this is the first hint of something bigger, a tremor before the earthquake. Across the world, other small, quiet anomalies begin to appear. In a distant village along the Levant coast, an old fisherman pulls up his nets and finds far fewer fish than he expected. He looks at the sky, smells the warm wind, and mutters, "The sea is changing." In Anatolia, a Hittite scribe writes a message for his king. "My lord, the rains did not come this year. The harvest is failing." In Mycenae, a soldier polishing his bronze armor whispers to a friend, "Did you hear? Another town inland was abandoned. Families vanished overnight." None of these moments seem connected, but soon they will be. For now, the world continues with its usual rhythm. Caravans cross deserts, ships glide between islands, kings send envoys with gifts, gold rings, lapis lazuli, fine linen, chariot armies parade before cheering crowds. Scribes record everything meticulously on tablets that will survive millennia. Yet beneath the splendor lies fragility. Every palace, every city, every kingdom depends on long-distance trade. Bronze, the metal that powers armies, tools, and wealth, requires copper from Cyprus and tin from thousands of kilometers away. Disrupt a single route, a single mine, a single port, and the world begins to wobble. But no one sees the danger clearly. Why would they? For centuries, this system had endured storms, wars, famines, and political turmoil. It had always recovered. Kings believed the gods protected them. Their palaces were vast, their armies strong, their wealth unmatched. In Egypt, a royal official prepares a list of supplies needed for an upcoming festival. But as he checks the tallies, he hesitates. The storehouses are not as full as last year. He shakes his head, writes double rations, and hopes for the best. In Ugarit, the merchant finally receives a message carved on a clay tablet. The ships are delayed, pirates or raiders along the coast. He sighs and adds it to a growing stack of excuses. In Cyprus, a miner stops to catch his breath and stares at the nearly empty tin veins. He wonders how much longer the mines will last. These are the first whispers of a disaster that will soon roar like a storm. But life continues. Feasts, markets, ceremonies. Priests burn incense in golden bowls. Diplomats arrive with gifts of silver and chariots. Musicians play lyres while dancers perform under oil lamps. The world glitters, unaware it stands on a cliff's edge. If you could walk through a Bronze Age palace right now, you would see painted frescoes, ornate jewelry, carved ivory furniture, archives filled with tablets. You would hear the scribes speaking several languages: Egyptian, Akkadian, Hittite, Mycenaean Greek. You would smell roasted meat, wine, myrrh, and incense. It feels eternal, unbreakable. But in the corners of these grand halls, shadows are growing. Bad harvests, silent harbors, raids along the coast, villages abandoned, trade faltering, drought creeping across farmlands. A world too interconnected is a world too easy to break, and soon everything will break. This is the last chapter of peace, the final quiet before the storm. The kings still believe their empires will stand forever. Merchants still believe the ships will return. Generals still believe their armies will win every battle. But the collapse has already begun. Over the next decades, cities that have stood for 1,000 years will burn. Languages will disappear forever. Trade routes will go silent. Palaces will crumble into dust. A dark age will swallow everything. The late Bronze Age, the world's first global civilization, is living its final days, and no one knows it yet. In the years that followed the golden peak of the late Bronze Age, something subtle began to shift. At first, it felt like nothing, just a faint tremor beneath the surface of everyday life. But tremors can warn of earthquakes, and this world was already beginning to crack. Across the eastern Mediterranean, the first signs of trouble drifted in like smoke on a distant horizon. They were easy to ignore, easy to explain away, yet impossible to escape forever. One morning in northern Canaan, an elderly farmer kneels in his field as the rising sun burns a strange metallic color. He scoops a handful of soil, expecting it to crumble softly between his fingers. Instead, it turns to powder, dry, lifeless, silent. He stares at the sky. The clouds that should bring winter rain are nowhere to be found. He whispers a prayer, but the wind offers no answer. Weeks later, a caravan master trudges through the Syrian desert, wiping dust from his cracked lips. Wells that his father and grandfather relied on have dried without warning. The guides are afraid. Even the camels groan with exhaustion. He keeps glancing upward, telling himself the heat is normal. It isn't. Something in the world has changed. Far to the west, on the island of Cyprus, miners descend into deep shafts and brace themselves against walls of rock that seem to groan under their own weight. The tin veins grow thinner each season. Ore that once shimmered now flakes away into useless mineral dust. A foreman runs his hand across the rock face and mutters, "This mountain is dying." No one knows why. No one understands that these isolated events are connected, yet the evidence mounts. In Anatolia, a Hittite scribe records a desperate message from a small village. "Our fields have failed. Our children cry from hunger. We beg the king for relief." The scribe sets his stylus down and rubs his temples. He has copied this plea dozens of times in the past month. He has never seen so many requests at once. Even mighty Egypt feels the strain. Along the banks of the Nile, workers observe water levels falling lower than expected. The river that has given life for millennia withdraws, shrinking from its own banks as if retreating from an unseen threat. Priests perform rituals to appease the gods, but privately they whisper that the omens feel wrong. And while the land dries, the sea grows strange. Merchant captains begin to report unsettling stories: charred boats drifting empty, coastal towns eerily silent, ports missing entire fleets. One captain returns to Ugarit pale and shaken. There were no bodies, he tells the harbor master, just ashes, as if the crew vanished into the sea. Meanwhile, in the palace of a Levantine king, a heated argument breaks out among advisors. Caravans from inland have stopped arriving. Prices of grain are rising. Merchants complain that the roads are filled with refugees, hungry families fleeing parched fields and collapsing villages. The king's hand shakes slightly as he lifts a clay tablet and reads, "My brother, send grain. My people are starving." It is a plea from a neighboring ruler, but the king has no grain to spare. And still, the world tries to continue as it always has. Markets open at dawn, children play in courtyards, ships load copper ingots along the docks. But there is a quiet dread in the air, a sense shared by peasants and priests alike. Something is wrong. Trade, the lifeblood of the Bronze Age, begins to falter. A Mycenaean blacksmith stands in his workshop staring at an empty jar where tin should be. He has enough copper to fill a warehouse, but without tin, bronze dies, weapons die, tools die, an entire economy dies. He runs his hand across his anvil and mutters, "If the tin does not return, nothing will survive." In Ugarit, the same merchant who once watched empty horizons now wakes to distant shouts. He rushes to his balcony and sees torchlight flickering near the docks. Not a fire, not yet, but enough to rattle the nerves of a city that depends on every incoming ship. Within days, terrifying rumors spread. Coastal villages burned, fishermen slaughtered, settlements raided by strangers who come from the sea. At first, no one believes it. Then survivors arrive, starving, barefoot, trembling, and their stories shake the palaces. They are many. They carry their families with them. They destroy everything. They take what they want. They say they had no home left. Across the Mediterranean, similar reports emerge. Strangers gathering in massive groups, people fleeing drought-ravaged lands, entire populations on the move. This is not normal migration. It is a tide, and the tide is rising. In the Hittite Empire, a general rides through the countryside and sees abandoned farms, entire villages emptied without warning. He writes to his king, "Lord, the fields lie fallow, the roads are filled with wanderers, the kingdom frays." But the king cannot respond. The royal granaries are nearly empty. Drought grips the land. And now, raiders threaten the coast. Farther west, in Mycenae, soldiers whisper about shadowy attackers seen on distant shores. Some describe them as warriors with strange armor and foreign tongues. Others say they bring women, children, and elders with them, not raiders, but displaced nations. The letters exchanged between kings grow more frantic. "Brother, our storehouses are failing." "Brother, send soldiers." "Brother, the tribes at my border grow bold." "Brother, do not abandon us in this dark time." Many letters receive no reply. Some never leave their cities. Others, like the final message found in the ruins of Ugarit, are sealed but never sent. "The enemy is here. Our ships are gone. Our fields burn. Save us." It was baked in the fire that consumed the city. Throughout the region, famine spreads, crops wither, livestock starve, roads fill with refugees. Trade routes collapse one by one, like links in a delicate chain snapping under pressure. Soon, there are no shipments of tin, no shipments of grain, no ships at all. And then comes the final, undeniable truth. The crisis is bigger than kings, bigger than armies, bigger than any single nation. It is a system-wide collapse, the slow, grinding failure of a civilization too interconnected to survive disruption. Across the coastlines of the Mediterranean, the raiders grow bolder. What began as scattered attacks becomes coordinated, massive, and destructive. In Egypt, scouts return breathless to the pharaoh with chilling news. They come in many ships, an armada, entire tribes. They are driving south, unstoppable. The pharaoh prepares for war. In the Mycenaean world, palace guards strengthen fortifications. In Anatolia, exhausted Hittite soldiers march to defend borders that stretch too far. In Canaan, city gates close early each night as fear spreads among the people. And yet, even now, no one understands the scale of what's coming. They see drought, they see hunger, they see raiders, they see refugees, they see rebellion, they see missing ships, but they do not see the whole picture. They do not realize that every problem is connected, that every thread in their global system is fraying at the same time, and when every thread breaks at once, the world will unravel. The storm has arrived, the winds are rising, the foundations of the first global civilization tremble, and in the next chapter, those tremors will become fire. Soon, entire kingdoms will vanish from history, not over centuries, but in a single generation. The late Bronze Age is falling, and no one alive can stop it. The sea always carries whispers before it carries storms, and in the years around 1200 BC, the Mediterranean begins to whisper of things no one can yet understand. Fishermen in Cyprus notice strange patterns in the waves, currents that feel unfamiliar, winds that blow from unusual directions. Traders in Canaan speak of distant fires visible at night across the sea. Refugees arrive in small groups, gaunt and exhausted, claiming their homelands drowned in hunger and flame. Most people ignore these warnings. The sea has always been unpredictable. Rumors travel faster than truth, but the truth is coming, and it is coming by sea. It begins with a single ship spotted off the coast of Anatolia at dawn. A shepherd tending his flock squints at the horizon, expecting to see a merchant vessel. Instead, he sees a long, narrow ship covered in painted symbols, its prow carved into the shape of a glaring eye. Warriors stand on deck, their shields catching the rising sun. Behind them are women cradling infants, old men leaning on staffs, children clutching baskets. This is no raiding party. This is a people on the move. The shepherd drops his staff. For a moment, he thinks he's dreaming. Then he runs to warn the village. He is too late. Within hours, the settlement is ashes. Word spreads along the coast, settlements burning, survivors fleeing, raiders landing wherever the defenses are weakest. But the attackers are unlike anything seen before. They do not strike and disappear. They stay, they settle, they take. Soon, the whispers of distant destruction turn into screams. In the Mycenaean world across the Aegean, ships vanish. Merchants speak of entire islands gone dark. No trade, no signal fires, no life. A Mycenaean war captain stands on the ramparts of his citadel at Pylos, watching the sea glow orange from burning towns across the water. He grips the stone and murmurs, "This isn't piracy, it's an exodus." And the exodus is growing. Across the Mediterranean, drought and famine have uprooted entire populations. Cities collapse, trade fails, nations become refugees. The Sea Peoples, a coalition of displaced tribes, move across the water in desperate waves. Shurden, Shekelesh, Peliset, Denayan, Chikr, names that will echo through thousands of years. Names carved later into the walls of Egyptian temples. But for the peoples of the late Bronze Age, they are not names. They are doom. In Ugarit, the wealthy port city, life continues with forced normalcy. But at night, smoke on the horizon glows like a false sunset. Citizens gather at rooftops, staring in terrified silence. There is one scene that captures the moment before the fall. A mother wakes her two children as the sky begins to flicker with distant firelight. She kneels, tying small charms around their wrists, carved stones meant to protect them. Her hands tremble. Outside, drums roll across the coastline like thunder. Her eldest son whispers, "Mama, are the gods angry?" She forces a smile that never reaches her eyes. "The gods are watching," she says. "They will see us through." But deep inside, she knows the truth they cannot say aloud. The gods are not coming. When the attack finally comes, it strikes like lightning. Ugarit's streets choke with smoke. Warriors pour through the city gates. Chariots fail to mobilize in the chaos. The palace burns in a roaring inferno. The mother who tied charms on her children runs through the alleys, clutching them tight, searching for a safe place. A temple, a cellar, a hidden courtyard. But every path is blocked. Every refuge is full. Every door is barred. As flames climb the night sky, she presses her children close. In the noise and smoke, her final words disappear. Ugarit is erased in a single night. Its last letter, inscribed on a clay tablet, will be found thousands of years later, sealed in the ruins. The enemy is here. The ships are gone. Help us. No help ever came. From Anatolia to Cyprus to the Levant, city after city falls, a domino line of destruction. First the small coastal villages, then the port towns, then the fortified cities, then the capitals. The Hittite Empire, once the equal of Egypt, collapses with terrifying speed. Their armies are stretched thin by famine and rebellion, their granaries empty, their borders overrun. In Hattusa, the Hittite king holds a final council with his generals. Reports scatter the table, villages burned, roads cut, refugees flooding in, enemy fleets landing in the west. The king's voice is hoarse as he says, "We cannot hold, evacuate the capital." What follows is unimaginable. One of the great capitals of the ancient world, the city of lions, kings, and treaties, is abandoned. Its palace is empty, its gates unguarded, its archives left behind. Hattusa dies without a final battle. Then comes Cyprus, the island whose copper fueled the Bronze Age. The Sea Peoples strike with terrible force. Fortresses fall, mines stop. Bronze production, the lifeblood of empires, collapses. The world begins to darken. Next, the Sea Peoples turn toward the richest prize of all, Egypt. Scouts return to Pharaoh Ramesses III with faces pale as ash. Lord of the two lands, they are coming. How many? Too many to count. They fill the sea. Egypt prepares for its most desperate battle in centuries. Ramesses knows he is not facing an ordinary enemy. He is facing nations, shattered, starving, determined, people pushed to the edge of existence. So he builds a trap. He fortifies the Nile Delta. He stations archers along embankments. He positions chariots on the riverbanks. He orders the navy to hide in the channels and wait. And then, they arrive. A fleet unlike anything the ancient world has ever seen. Ships packed with warriors, settlers, families, entire tribes. Their prows slice the water. Drums boom across the river. War cries echo off the marshlands. The Sea Peoples surge forward, confident from their victories. They do not know they are sailing into a kill zone. Egyptian archers release a storm of arrows. Warships strike from both sides. Chariots thunder along the banks, cutting down fighters who make landfall. The battle erupts into a frenzy of splintering wood, screams, and blood-caked water. The Sea Peoples do not break. They fight with ferocity, fueled by hunger and the memory of lost homelands. But Egypt has prepared for this moment. The delta becomes their grave. By sunset, the Nile runs red. Ramesses III carves his victory onto the walls of Medinet Habu. They came from the sea. No land could stand before them, but we destroyed them. Egypt survives, but it does not win, because while Egypt remains standing, the world around it has already fallen. After the battles, envoys report the unthinkable. The Hittite Empire is gone. The Mycenaean palaces lie in ruins. Cyprus is abandoned. Ugarit is ash. Trade routes are broken. Bronze production dead. Writing systems vanish. Entire cultures disappear from human memory. The world of the late Bronze Age has collapsed. The Sea Peoples did not cause the fall, but they delivered the final blow. They were the storm that finished what drought, famine, rebellion, and economic decay had begun. Who were they? Invaders, migrants, victims of climate collapse, war bans, refugees. No answer is complete. Perhaps they were all of these things. But what they represent is clear. A world in motion, a world collapsing, a world desperate to survive. Their arrival marks the moment the old world dies, when the systems, alliances, and kingdoms that define the Bronze Age crumble into dust. From the ashes of this destruction will rise new civilizations: Phoenicia, Israel, archaic Greece. But that rebirth lies far beyond the horizon. For now, the world burns, and the age of heroes ends. When a civilization collapses, it rarely happens all at once. Usually, the fall is slow, a long descent measured in centuries. But the collapse of the late Bronze Age does not follow that pattern. It comes fast. It comes violently. It comes everywhere at once. And the first to fall are the cities, the shining capitals that once held the world together. Imagine standing in Ugarit months before its destruction. The streets still bustle with scribes, merchants, sailors, priests. Clay tablets pass from hand to hand. Ships unload their cargo. Markets ring with noise. But beneath the surface, fear grows like mold in dark corners. Food prices rise. Refugees crowd the gates. Ships arrive half empty, if they arrive at all. One night, a young scribe sits in the royal archive, copying a letter from the Hittite king. Halfway through the message, his reed stylus stops. The letter pleads for grain, for aid, for relief from an empire on the brink. He murmurs, "If the great ones beg, what hope is left for us?" The city answers with silence. Then comes the scream of a watchman. Torches on the water. Moments later, the walls echo with shouts. The Sea Peoples arrive in a wave of fire and metal. By dawn, Ugarit is smoke. Its entire existence ends in a single night. Archaeologists will find charred beams, collapsed roofs, clay tablets fused by heat, a frozen moment of catastrophe. A whole world stopped mid-sentence, and Ugarit is only the beginning. Across the sea, another titan of the age struggles for breath, the Hittite Empire. For centuries, the Hittites ruled Anatolia with iron fists and unmatched organization. Their capital, Hattusa, rises like a mountain fortress, gates carved with lions and sphinxes, palaces built from cyclopean stone, archives holding thousands of clay tablets. Now, the once bustling roads to the capital are empty. Refugees stumble toward the gates, pleading for food. Messengers come breathless with news. Enemies in the west. Rebellion in the south. Fields failing in the east. Caravans gone missing. No tin. No grain. No tribute. The Hittite king gathers his advisors in the throne room. Torches flicker, casting long shadows across stone pillars. General after general steps forward, each bearing worse news than the last. Our borders are broken. Our armies are exhausted. Our storehouses nearly empty. Our vassals desert us by the week. Finally, the king speaks, his voice low, steady, but shaking at the edges. Hattusa cannot be held. Silence grips the room. It is the unthinkable, the unimaginable, the end of a world that believed itself eternal. Over the next days, Hittite officials gather what they can carry. Sacred statues, royal treasures, archives too large to save are left behind. And then, the last torch is extinguished. The final gates close. The capital of a mighty empire is abandoned to the wind. When archaeologists rediscover Hattusa millennia later, they find its massive walls still standing, but everything else is gone. No civilians, no defenders, no kings, just stone and silence. South of Anatolia, the island of Cyprus burns next. Cyprus once supplied copper to half the known world. Its mines powered empires. Its foundries forged weapons, tools, chariot parts. Now, the island trembles with fear. Foreign ships crowd its shores, cities fortify their walls. Villagers flee inland carrying whatever they can. In Enkomi, one of Cyprus's richest cities, a metalsmith stares at a block of copper on his table. His furnace lies cold. He has no tin left to make bronze. His apprentices have fled. He runs a hand along the copper's smooth edge and whispers, "We built our world on metal, and now the metal is gone." At sunrise, the sea peoples descend on the island. Arrows darken the sky. Doors splinter. Streets choke with smoke. One by one, the cities fall. Cyprus no longer exports copper. It no longer trades. It no longer supports empires. Its collapse pushes the entire region closer to ruin. And what of Greece, the proud Mycenaean kingdoms? The fall there is different. Not sudden, not one catastrophic strike, but a long, choking collapse, as if the land itself slowly loses the will to live. In Mycenae, palace scribes whisper that shipments of grain from Egypt and Cyprus have stopped. The king grows paranoid, convinced his allies betray him. He orders fortifications strengthened, walls rebuilt, guard posts expanded. But the enemy is not simply an army. The enemy is the breakdown of the entire system. Trade disappears, crops fail, rebellions spread. The palace economy, once a marvel of organization, crumbles into chaos. One night, a fire erupts in the granary district of Mycenae. No one knows if it is sabotage, rebellion, or accident, but the flames consume storerooms, workshops, and archives. The palace survives, barely, but it is weakened beyond repair. In Pylos, the end is clearer and more tragic. A terrified messenger bursts into the throne room, gasping, "Ships! Many ships! Raiders coming from the sea!" The king orders the tablets destroyed. Records of taxes, harvests, trade, administration, everything that defines a kingdom. Clay tablets are hurled into fires, baked instantly into hardened relics. Moments later, the attackers descend. The palace falls. Its frescoes crack. Its columns collapse. Its people vanish. Pylos is abandoned forever. The Mycenaean world breaks into pieces. The next generation grows up illiterate, unable to read the language their grandparents mastered. They live in tiny villages, not palaces. They craft simple tools, not golden masks. They forget the old gods, the old stories, the old ways. It is the birth of the Greek Dark Age. One by one, great cities vanish across the map. Ugarit, Hattusa, Enkomi, Pylos, Mycenae, Troy, Ashkelon, Megiddo. Some burn violently, others crumble quietly. All disappear, and with them disappears the interconnected world that once tied everything together. No more letters between kings, no more copper shipments from Cyprus, no more tin caravans from the east. No more Mycenaean fleets. No more Hittite chariots. No more scribes copying tablets. The world becomes smaller, darker, quieter. Historians thousands of years later debate what happened. Was it climate collapse, earthquakes, famine, invasion, rebellion? All of them at once? The answer lies in the ruins themselves, in the charred doors of Ugarit, in the abandoned streets of Hattusa, in the smashed workshops of Cyprus, in the burned palaces of Greece. A system stretched too thin finally snaps. But for the people living through it, there is no system, only fear, only hunger, only fire, only the sound of cities dying. Yet even now, as the world collapses, a new one begins to form beneath the ashes. In the hills above Canaan, small tribal groups gather to build a new kind of society, not ruled by kings and palaces, but by families in simple homes. In the mountains of Greece, survivors carry small fragments of old stories, tales that will one day become the seeds of Homeric epics. In narrow Phoenician harbors, shipbuilders and traders quietly adapt to the new world, preparing to rise as the next great maritime power. The world that falls is not the world that rises, but that rebirth is far in the future. For now, the great cities of the late Bronze Age lie silent, their ruins a graveyard for a vanished world. Long before the great cities burned, long before the sea peoples appeared on the horizon, long before the palaces fell, the disaster had already begun, not with swords, not with fire, but with the sky. For centuries, the climate of the eastern Mediterranean was remarkably stable. Rain fell in predictable seasons, rivers flooded at the right time, harvests thrived, and the world of the late Bronze Age grew fat on this consistency. But something shifted, gradually at first, then violently. The earliest warning came not from kings or scribes, but from farmers, the people closest to the earth. A farmer in Canaan kneels in his field at dawn, expecting to feel cool soil between his fingers. Instead, he lifts a fistful of dust, fine, dry, lifeless. He looks to the sky. No clouds, no wind, just a sun that feels sharper than usual, as if it pierces the world instead of warming it. He whispers, "Not again," because this is the third failed harvest in a row. In Cyprus, olive trees shed their leaves long before the season's end. In Anatolia, rivers shrink into narrow trickles. In Greece, springs that once nourished entire valleys run dry. But ancient people don't know of atmospheric oscillations or volcanic interference. They only know what they see. The heavens are closing. Tree rings, sampled thousands of years later, reveal the truth. A long, relentless drought spreading like a shadow over the entire region. For some places, it lasts decades. For others, more than a century. For the heart of the Bronze Age, it becomes a 300-year nightmare. But back then, no one understood the scale. They only knew their survival depended on rain, and rain had betrayed them. At first, people tried to endure. Wells were dug deeper, irrigation canals extended farther, cities opened emergency granaries. But the earth could not be convinced. The clouds would not return. Soon, hunger became famine. In a small village in the Hittite lands, a family gathers around a table where food once sat in abundance. Tonight, the mother places a single bowl on the wooden surface, a thin soup made from wild herbs and water. Her youngest child asks, "Is this all?" She smiles weakly. It's enough. She knows it isn't. Across the Levant, granaries shrink, markets empty, livestock die. People begin to look at one another with the quiet, terrible awareness shared only during famines. Not all of us will survive the winter. Kings receive reports filled with increasingly desperate pleas. The rains have failed again. Our fields are barren. Our people grow restless. We beg for grain. But nothing can stop a famine that spans continents. When local supplies run out, cities look to trade. But trade routes are crippled. Egypt cannot spare food. Cyprus cannot mine copper. The Hittites cannot protect caravans. The Mycenaeans cannot ship grain. The network that once fed millions shatters. Hunger becomes a weapon. Villages raid neighboring villages. Bandits flourish along dry mountain passes. Farmers arm themselves with tools, forming militias to defend what little they have. In Anatolia, a caravan attempting to reach the capital is ambushed. The guards are overwhelmed by desperate men who haven't eaten in days. They do not steal gold. They do not steal weapons. They steal only the sacks of barley. One guard survives long enough to whisper to the commander, "They looked like ghosts." And, in a sense, they were. A famine creates ghosts before it creates corpses. In the Greek mainland, scribes watch grain stores dwindle and realize there is no hope of resupply. The palatial economy collapses inward. Without grain to pay workers, without trade to supply tin, without food to feed soldiers, the system dissolves like wet clay. In the mountain villages of Canaan, elders gather to discuss the future. The springs have dried, the fields crack, children grow weak. One elder says quietly, "If the land will not feed us, we must leave it." Migration begins, slow at first, then tidal. Across the Mediterranean, thousands pack what little they have and move toward regions rumored to still have water, food, and safety. These rumors are mostly lies. The pressure of migration destabilizes entire regions. Cities overwhelmed by refugees must choose between compassion and survival. Many shut their gates. People begin to starve outside city walls. In the heart of the Hittite world, a village elder writes one last message on a clay tablet. "We pray for rain. We pray for mercy. Neither has come. The tablet will never reach the king." As famine deepens, societies fray. People blame kings. Kings blame foreign enemies. Priests blame the gods. Commoners blame priests. Everyone blames the sky. The desperation grows so severe that some communities resort to extreme measures, abandoning infants, sacrificing animals, selling land, selling themselves. Famine turns morality into luxury. A Mycenaean woman, once wealthy, now trades her last gold earring for a basket of barley husks. Not barley, husks. Scraps barely fit for animals. It is all that remains. She thanks the trader with tears in her eyes. In Egypt, one of the few regions less devastated thanks to the Nile, grain prices skyrocket. Riots break out. Scribes record crowds smashing grain silos, looting bakeries, attacking officials. The pharaoh orders rations, but even the Nile cannot offset the collapse of the Mediterranean world. And still, the drought grows worse. In some regions, 3 generations live and die without seeing a normal rainy season. Wells run dry. Fields turn to stone. Rivers shrink into muddy scars. Forests thin as people cut trees for firewood and replacement farmland. And when the rains disappear for long enough, dust becomes the dominant season. Dust on homes, dust in eyes, dust in lungs, dust covering bodies in shallow graves. Drought is more than thirst. It is the erasure of life. But drought alone doesn't topple empires. It's what drought unleashes. Famine, migration, conflict, rebellion, war, total collapse. In a coastal town in Canaan, 2 groups of starving refugees approach the city at once, one from the mountains, one from the south. The guards panic. The gates close. A clash erupts, not between armies, but between hungry families. Stones fly. People scream. Dozens die. It is the new face of war, not for conquest, for calories. In Anatolia, rebellions spread like fire on dry grass. Former allies turn on each other. Vassals refuse tribute. Soldiers mutiny after months without pay or food. A Hittite commander, exhausted and defeated, writes his final message. "We fought bravely, but we cannot fight hunger." His garrison will abandon its post the next morning. Meanwhile, raider bands rise across the region, men with nothing left to lose. They plunder caravans, attack farms, raid villages, but the darkest, most desperate mass of all becomes something history will remember as the Sea Peoples. Famine does not just destroy, it mobilizes. And in that mobilization, entire populations uproot themselves in search of food, water, and survival. From collapsing regions, Anatolia, the Aegean, the Balkans, the Levant, tens of thousands march, sail, or flee south and east. Where they travel, cities fall, fortresses crumble, armies shatter. The world of abundance becomes a world of scarcity, and scarcity turns neighbors into enemies. In the mountain valley of Greece, a father buries his last child, a boy no older than 7. He places a simple clay bead in the grave, something the boy once held for luck. The earth is so dry that he must break it with a stone to dig the hole. When he finishes, he does not cry. He simply whispers, "Forgive me," and walks away from the village forever. His story is one of millions, stories lost to time, buried with no tablets, no inscriptions, no monuments. The collapse is not just political or economic. It is human. It is lived in empty stomachs, trembling hands, cracked soil, and silent prayers. It is felt in the uncertainty of each sunrise, trying to survive another day in a world that no longer works. Eventually, the cumulative strain breaks everything. The Hittite Empire dissolves. The Mycenaean palaces crumble. Cyprus burns. Levantine cities fall. Trade routes vanish. Crafts disappear. Writing systems die. Populations shrink. A civilization that once flourished for centuries disintegrates in less than a generation. And at the center of this destruction lies a simple truth. The land failed first, and everything else failed after. But out of this collapse will emerge new societies, small, adaptable, resilient. People who find new ways to survive in a broken world. The old world is dead. A new world is rising. But before that world can rise, the darkness must complete its work. The famine is not done. The drought is not over. The collapse has not reached its final stage. Civilizations rarely fall because they are conquered. More often, they fall because their foundations quietly rot from within until the whole structure collapses under its own weight. For the late Bronze Age, that foundation was metal, not gold, not silver, bronze. And when bronze disappeared, the world disappeared with it. Bronze was the miracle of its time, harder than copper, easier to forge than iron, resistant to weather and wear. With bronze, farmers plowed deeper, soldiers fought harder, cities built stronger. Without bronze, every system that depended on it began to wither. But bronze was not a gift from the earth. It was a delicate recipe, one that required copper and a second ingredient far rarer and far more vulnerable: tin. Copper lay close at hand: Cyprus, Anatolia, the mountains of the Levant. But tin came from distant, mysterious places: the mountains of Afghanistan, the deserts of Central Asia, the islands near the Aegean, the mines deep inland beyond the reach of great empires. Tin was the lifeblood of the age. And the first sign of collapse was when the tin stopped coming. Picture a metalsmith in Enkomi on the island of Cyprus, a place once known as the Copper Kingdom. His workshop is warm from the fire in the furnace. Bronze blades hang on the wall, slender, sharp, beautifully balanced. But his apprentices stand idle. His molds lie empty. Beside the furnace sits a clay jar that once held tin. It is almost empty. The metalsmith lifts the jar and shakes it gently. A few grains rattle at the bottom. He closes his eyes. Without tin, copper alone is soft and weak. Without tin, there is no bronze. Without bronze, there are no tools, no weapons, no chariots, no gears, no fittings, no hinges. The world begins to unravel in his hands. He whispers to himself, "Where are the caravans? Where are the ships?" But he already knows the answer. They are gone. Trade routes have burned. Caravans have vanished. Cities that mined, refined, or transported tin have fallen. And without them, the entire Bronze Age economy, from royal courts to village workshops, collapses. Now imagine the Mycenaean world. In Pylos, blacksmiths gather around a dying furnace. The last of their tin is gone. A soldier slams his hand on the table. "How can I fight with copper? It bends." The smith replies quietly. "And iron. We tried it. It shatters." And it does. The first iron of this era is brittle and crude, a metal still in its infancy, a poor replacement for bronze's strength and reliability. The Mycenaean warrior looks at his dull copper spearhead and shakes his head. How do we protect the kingdom with this? He gets no answer. In Anatolia, Hittite chariot makers face a similar crisis. Chariots, the tanks of the Bronze Age, require bronze nails, bronze brackets, bronze studs, bronze axles. Bronze is what holds the thunderous machines together when they race across the battlefield. One missing nail can cost a battle. One missing shipment can cost an empire. A chariot builder examines a war chariot in his workshop. Its frame sturdy, its wheels flawless. But where bronze once gleamed, empty holes remain. "We cannot finish it," he mutters. "We cannot finish anything." His apprentice asks, "Will the army fight without chariots?" The builder looks at the boy for a long moment. "No," he says. "They will die." Everywhere, workshops close. Furnaces go cold. Metalsmiths leave their homes. Knowledge disappears. But the collapse is not only material, it is intellectual. The Bronze Age is not just an era of empires. It is an era of specialists, scribes, architects, engineers, metallurgists, glassmakers, chariot builders, palace administrators. All rely on complex systems and on bronze. When bronze vanishes, specialization vanishes. When specialization vanishes, knowledge vanishes. A glassmaker in the Levant stares at his failing kiln. Glass production requires precise temperatures, controlled by bronze tools and fittings. Without them, the glass cracks, bubbles, or collapses. He tries again and again. Each attempt fails. After the third day, he breaks down and says to his apprentice, "I can no longer teach you. The craft is dying." In a palace in Thebes, an Egyptian administrator writes a letter to a neighboring king. "Where is the copper you promised? Where is the tin? Our workshops stand silent." But the letter never reaches its destination. The trade network has dissolved. A Mycenaean scribe attempts to record the kingdom's metal inventory, but numbers mean nothing when ships stop arriving. He writes one final line: "Without bronze, the palace cannot endure." He is right. Weapons dull, tools break, chariot parts fail, armor weakens, harvesting equipment snaps and cannot be replaced. Households return to stone hammers, bone needles, wooden plows. Civilization rewinds, in some places literally. Archaeologists digging in former Bronze Age cities find something astonishing. After centuries of progress, people return to technology from 500 years earlier. Stone weights, stone blades, primitive pottery, simple huts replacing grand palaces. It is as if humanity suddenly forgot the last millennium. But forgetting is not sudden. It is a slow bleed. Picture the last functional bronze workshop in a coastal town. The metalsmith sits on a low stool staring at the cold furnace. His son, a boy of 12, sits beside him. "Father, will you teach me the trade?" The metalsmith hesitates. "I want to," he says, "but I cannot teach you something the world no longer lets me do." The boy lowers his head. "We built everything with bronze," the father continues, "and we thought it would last forever." He puts a hand on his son's shoulder. "Remember this, nothing lasts forever." In another village, a blacksmith tries to teach himself ironworking, hammering the red-hot metal only to watch it crack with each strike. He throws the failed sword to the ground. "This metal lies," he growls. But the truth is that early iron is simply too impure, too unstable. It will take centuries to refine the techniques that turn iron into steel. The world is not ready for iron. Iron is born in pain. And so the Bronze Age dies, not just through war and famine, but through technological regression. The collapse of bronze is the collapse of complexity itself. Now imagine the ripple effect. No bronze, no tools, failed harvests, famine, migration, conflict, destroyed cities, lost knowledge, no bronze. The cycle feeds itself like a serpent, devouring its own tail. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the last stronghold of Bronze Age power, workshops struggle to maintain even basic production. Bronze becomes a luxury item reserved only for royalty and the military elite. One Egyptian official writes, "Bronze is worth more than gold." And he is not exaggerating. When bronze becomes priceless, everything built on bronze becomes fragile. The chariots that once defined warfare, they rot in storage. The palace doors with bronze hinges, they creak and collapse. The irrigation systems maintained by bronze tools, they fail, and fields die. Knowledge fades in real time. In a palace school in the Levant, a teacher tries to instruct his young students in writing, but the supply of bronze-tipped styluses has dwindled. He hands the boys dull, worn tools. One student asks, "Why do the old tablets look perfect and ours look broken?" The teacher cannot explain that the world they live in is running out of the very tools needed to preserve knowledge. He simply says, "The gods favored the old times more." The darkness spreads, not because people forget, but because they cannot practice what they know. Technology dies not with ignorance, but with scarcity. And then, as if to complete the cycle, something unexpected happens. Iron slowly, painfully, reluctantly begins to replace bronze, not because people prefer iron, but because they have no choice. At first, iron weapons are inferior. They bend, they chip, they break. A young warrior in the mountains of Greece picks up an iron sword for the first time. He swings it. The blade vibrates and nearly slips from his hand. He frowns. "This is weaker." His father replies, "It is what remains." Then, over generations, iron improves, not through luxury or innovation, but through necessity. Necessity births new techniques, water quenching, improved smelting, better furnaces, hammering impurities out of the ore. It takes years. It takes desperation, but slowly, iron becomes stronger. And when iron finally surpasses bronze, the world enters a new age. An age built not on palace networks and long-distance trade, but on local survival. Small communities forge their own tools. Families shape their own weapons. Iron does not require empires. It requires only ore, fire, and knowledge. Iron democratizes technology. The Bronze Age collapses. The Iron Age rises. And with that rise comes new kingdoms, new languages, new gods, new myths. But all of that lies in the future. For now, the world stands amid ruins. Palaces burned, cities deserted, workshops silent. The Bronze Age has ended, and humanity stands at the beginning of a bitter, violent rebirth. History often teaches us through triumph, through kings crowned, empires built, monuments raised. But the collapse of the late Bronze Age teaches us through something far more profound: fragility. It reminds us that civilization, no matter how mighty, is never guaranteed. It must be sustained every day, every generation, or it crumbles like dust beneath our feet. The kingdoms of the Bronze Age once seemed eternal. They endured wars, droughts, rebellions, migrations, dynastic chaos. They built palaces of stone, carved libraries of clay, commanded armies of chariots, and stretched their influence across continents through sprawling trade networks. And yet, in a single lifetime, they vanished. Not because humanity lost intelligence, not because the gods turned away, but because the systems that held everything together, climate, agriculture, metal supply, trade, governance, failed all at once. What followed was not simply destruction, it was unmaking. A world that had taken centuries to build unraveled in a handful of years. Great cities emptied, archives fell silent, temples burned, languages disappeared, knowledge vanished. Life, for many, returned to what it had been 1,000 years earlier. And yet, despite all this, humanity survived. The collapse did not end us. It reshaped us. Imagine walking through the ruins of Ugarit a generation after the fires. Charred beams lie across broken walls. Clay tablets crumble beneath your feet. A child from a nearby village picks up a painted shard of pottery and asks his mother who lived here. She doesn't know. No one has spoken the names of Ugarit's kings in decades. In Hattusa, vines curl around the fallen gates. A shepherd leads his flock across stones where royal councils once thundered with diplomacy. He calls it the Old City, knowing nothing of the empire that stood there. In Mycenae, the mighty walls tower over a simple wooden hut built by a farmer who cares more about surviving winter than understanding the ruins beside him. In this silence, something begins. Families gather, villages reform, communities shrink but stabilize. Without palaces dictating every detail of life, people become more self-reliant. They farm locally. They forge tools from nearby iron deposits. They repair instead of replace. Iron is not yet perfect, but it is abundant, accessible, democratic. It does not require empires, only ore, fire, and persistence. The first iron tools are crude and brittle, but each generation improves them. A blacksmith learns to quench metal in water, making it stronger. His son learns to fold the metal to remove impurities. His grandson learns to build hotter furnaces. Knowledge returns not from archives, but from survival. As old empires vanish, new identities rise from the ashes. In the Levant, small tribes grow into new cultures: Israelites, Arameans, Phoenicians. The Phoenicians rebuild their coastal towns and take to the sea, becoming the greatest sailors of the ancient world and spreading an alphabet that will transform humanity. In Greece, memories of Mycenaean kings fade into legend, retold as stories of heroes, Achilles, Agamemnon, Odysseus, epics that form the roots of Western literature. In Anatolia, new kingdoms emerge: Phrygians, Lydians, Urartians. In Mesopotamia, Assyria rises with iron weapons and disciplined armies, creating empires impossible in the Bronze Age. Egypt survives, but is forever changed, smaller, weaker, humbled. Through all these lands, the shape of civilization transforms. The world becomes more diverse, more fragmented, more adaptable. The collapse burns away the old and forces humanity to build anew. As centuries pass, memories of the Bronze Age become legend. People speak of cities that burned in a single night, of invaders from the sea, of gods who abandoned their people. Myth becomes the language of forgotten history. Yet beneath these myths lies a simple truth. The Bronze Age collapsed because it was too interconnected, too dependent on perfect conditions. Climate shifted, harvests failed, trade broke, tools disappeared, armies fell, systems collapsed, but the people did not. The final lesson of this era is not about destruction, it is about resilience. Civilizations are fragile, humans are not. We endure droughts, famines, wars, migrations, and the loss of everything we thought permanent. And still, we rebuild. Imagine now a young boy standing in the hills of Greece. He has never seen a palace, never read a clay tablet, never heard of Mycenae or Hattusa or Ugarit, but in his hand he carries a small iron knife, simple, sturdy, sharper than anything his ancestors forged. In the evening, his grandfather sits beside him and points toward the ruins on a distant ridge. People long ago built that place, he says. They were great. Their world was great, but it ended. The boy asks, "Why did it end?" The old man thinks for a long moment before answering softly, "Because they believed it never could." The boy looks at the glowing ruins in the fading light. He doesn't know it yet, but he lives at the beginning of a new age, an age that will reshape the world. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, but humanity continues, always.
You saw